Thank you. I'm going to call tonight's meeting to order. All rise for the flag salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Can we have roll call, please?
Councilmember Murray.
Present.
Councilmember Ryan.
Here.
Councilmember Page.
Present.
Mayor Matsumoto Wright.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Wall.
Here.
Councilmember Sawmore.
Here.
Councilmember Woodard.
Here.
That concludes roll call.
Thank you. Do we have any late changes to the agenda?
There we go. We do, Mayor, and we did have for the annexation item before you this evening, item number 5. We had a typo in the address of the property to be annexed when we sent out the public notice. And in order to be safe and because there's no real time crunch at this point, we would like to move that item date certain to September 4th for your September 4th agenda, if council is comfortable with that.
Is everyone okay with that? Okay, looks like that's all right.
That's the only change. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So next is the public comment. Do we have anyone signed up for public comment?
Yes, we have Adam Sakay online. Adam, you'll have 5 minutes to speak.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi. So last week I spoke out against moving forward with flock cameras, and I wanted to provide a quick update. I'm not sure if anyone here reads Dustin's Mountlake Terrace musings blog, but since last week, an investigation has revealed that Flock has been lying to the public about federal access to its data. I don't want to reinvent the wheel, so I highly encourage everyone to read what he wrote and the details of the investigation. While forming an oversight council is better than nothing, the bottom line is that this company can't be trusted, and its mission is fundamentally fascist, dystopian, and destructive. While it's unfortunate that the contract was signed, hopefully it's beyond clear at this point that the only right move is to treat it as a sunk cost, not install the cameras, and tell Flock that they have no place in our town. It's better to learn from our mistakes than to double down on them. As I said last week, Flock isn't the solution, it's the threat. Secondly, I'd like to briefly reinforce a point I made last week, that the town could have spent the $57,000 it spent on the Flock contract in a way that could have actually provided safety to the community, and that it can still do that with future money. We're heading into the new school year during a massive COVID wave. Despite long COVID officially becoming the #1 health condition in children, surpassing even asthma, kids are unfortunately once again being shoved into hallways and classrooms full of COVID completely unprotected. This is an egregious safety issue for our kids, for our teachers, for our parents, for everyone, since it's been determined that schools drive community transmission. A Corsi Cube is a simple, powerful, portable, cost-efficient air purifier that can be placed in classrooms in order to dramatically reduce the amount of COVID, other viruses, and pollutants in the air. A cube can be built in 20 minutes, and the cost of materials is roughly $80. The $57,000 could have been spent on building over 700 cubes for our schools, and building them could have even been turned into a fun community event where families get together to build them while wearing N95 masks in an effort to protect our community from the #1 threat that it's facing. That's what community care and safety look like, not installing a dystopian surveillance system. As the new school year begins, remember, crime isn't exploding in Mountlake Terrace, COVID is. It's time for the town to part ways with Flock and come together to protect each other from actual threats. Thank you.
Yes, our next speaker is John Blake-Schmidt. You'll have 5 minutes to speak.
John Blake Smith, 4905 219th Street Southwest, Mountlake Terrace.
I like to say the other day, I had a couple of people come by canvassing and for a council person running for a council seat. It was really refreshing. That's the first time that's ever happened. I've lived here over 30 years, and the lady running has some good ideas. Some of them I think are good anyway. Hopefully some of that stuff will happen if that person wins. And I also got this from off the computer for rodent problems from the state. And there's a whole bunch of stuff here. Chrissy has a copy of this. Hopefully, I don't know, it says like, trim the vegetation and don't allow plants to grow up alongside your house. These people have things growing clear up onto the roof, and they have a shed in the back. It's growing clear all over the house. And I said something to Code, and she says, we don't have a law that says I can do anything about that. You guys need to do something about it so that can be taken care of. They cut it down, a cherry tree, cut it down about a month ago. It had stuff all over the ground. They have geese out there, and I'm sure they don't go around picking up the geese's feces every day. So that says they're not supposed to have that there. Yeah, and you're supposed to keep it clear of junk and debris. If you look at a Google map and look down, there is not a place on that property that's not covered with some kind of vegetation except where their house is and their driveway. And they have probably 5 or 6 garbage cans alongside their house, which sounds reasonable, but it's in a cul-de-sac. And there's brochures on the city website. If you go down to the bottom of the city website and you look out at outdoor storage, and this I was told by someone in the city a couple years ago, is because it is on a cul-de-sac, they have to put something up so the neighbor can't see it and it can't be seen from the street. And that is on one of your brochures. That needs to be addressed. There's a house down the street at 4807 219th that has a motorhome. It's been in the driveway for 8 or 9 years, which is fine. It's in good shape. But alongside that, in the driveway, within spitting distance of the sidewalk, they have 5 or 6 garbage cans. They're supposed to be back by the house. And towards, like on Tuesdays, they're pretty well overflowing a lot of time. Doesn't look very good. Something needs to be done about that. And about the police giving parking tickets, the mayor told me she thought they were. I don't think they're giving very many. And I overheard two members of the council, in fact, a couple years ago talking about that. And one told the other, I think they think it's below their dignity to give tickets. And the other one agreed. And one of them's not here anymore. But I think they agree with what I've been espousing. And I was told by a member of staff that's no longer here that the chief of police told them that wasn't a priority. But maybe it should be. And you guys need to go to 220th and go north from 55th up and look at what the hell's going on there. The north end of the city needs a lot of work. Thank you.
Any more?
No one else has signed up for remote comment or in-person comment.
All right, thank you. Okay, Mayor Pro Tem, consent agenda.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Move to approve the consent agenda, items A and B.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That has passed. And on the next item, Mayor Pro Tem Wall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Move to postpone the public hearing and vote on the property annexation petition until the September 4th meeting.
Second.
Sorry, if I might just add some amended language, use the phrase date certain, September 4th. It's a technicality.
Move to postpone the public hearing and vote on property annexation petition to date certain of September 4th.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? It has been moved. Thank you. And next is our presentation on the 2024 year-end financial report. And this is the first presentation with our senior accountant, Artis Nemati.
Good evening. So today we're going to be doing the fiscal year 2024 financial report, giving you the update on how that year ended. My name is Artis Nemati. I'm the senior accountant with the city of Mountlake Terrace. A little closer, sure. There we are. All right, the purpose of this presentation is relatively simple. We're going to be presenting to you the city's financial position as of the end of 2024. First, we're going to go through the revenues, budgets, actuals by fund, and the expenditure budgets to actual by fund. And then we're going to close out tonight by looking at the debt balances and the maturities as they were on December 31st, 2024. Starting off, we're going to look at the revenues of the general fund. The top bar is your budgeted revenues, and the bottom is the actual. As you can see, our actual revenues came in slightly higher than the budgeted revenues, and we're going to go into a little more detail on what parts made up that variance. Pardon me as I take out my notes on this slide. Okay. Overall, the revenues for the general fund were $600,000 over the budgeted amounts. Some small bits that made up of that were extra collections in utility tax for fire suppression. We also received more in solid waste tax fees. We have one item that stands out there, the transportation line, which we had stopped receiving transport fees from South County Fire in 2023, but we had a budget line for it. And then also there were higher than anticipated interest collections on our cash balances. And the next slide is just going to show you those numbers in graphical form so you can see just how those lined up. Next slide shows that the other funds that we consider governmental funds, fleet management, debt service, recreation, street operating. And we're going to definitely go into just a few of these that have the larger variances, just so you can see the differences and where they arose from. Our fleet management fund is funded through reimbursements from the other funds for their needs based on financial models. Our actual collections from the other funds are higher sometimes when the needs of the fleet management fund is higher. So we did have some extra vehicles that we purchased during the year which drove these variances, and you can see which funds ended up transferring more money to the transportation fund to accomplish that. And once again, the next slide is simply that put into a graphical form in case that can show the variances better. We also broke down the street operating fund to show you where the variances were. The street operating fund is mostly comprised of shared state revenues. So we budget based off of estimates given to us, forecasts from the state. And the actuals are simply what the state sends down to us as we get through the year. These are the remainder of the smaller governmental funds for the city. And we don't break any of these down in more detail based on their size, but we did want to put out that the variance on the hotel motel tax fund is mostly due to conservative nature of budgeting. We don't necessarily know what we're going to get on that one, and it was our best attempt. But as you can see, we ended up collecting quite a bit more. And then the strategic reserve had a variance due to the investments within it receiving more than we budgeted in terms of that, and that's also a conservative. We were just conservative on what we believed our interest revenue was going to be. Next, we have the utility funds. Of these, the one that we're going to go into more detail is the water utility funds, which came in with collections below budgeted. One small driver of this, and you're going to hear this a few other slides as well. In 2024, there was one of the second year, basically, that we did our cash conversion. So we are now a cash basis government in our accounting records. Unfortunately, that does create some timing differences between when revenues are shown in which year. And that was not something that could have been budgeted for, but the actuals, they are where they lie based on the accounting rules. For the cash is collected in that year, that's when we're going to display it as revenue. So no accrual, if that makes sense. Same thing, we had some investment interest that was higher than budgeted, and then the loan proceeds were as budgeted, was the maximum amount that we could have taken out on that loan. The actuals is the actual drawdowns on the loan. So the major variance in this fund, lies on that line, and it's just simply that we did not draw down the entire loan balance because the projects didn't need them at the time.
So think of that one, the loan proceeds is like your credit card max, and we haven't used all of our available credit. So that's why that variance is so large.
We have a question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So in looking at the revenues, I mean, really, we need to take the loan proceeds number out, which is the big one, of course. But I guess the one I'm most concerned about, can you go back to the water services? And I guess, are we going to get into detail on that? That's almost $1 million difference in budget versus actual. We're $1 million short, I guess. Are we going to talk about, I know we got a whole upcoming management plan that we've got to deal with, and that's, I'm sure we'll get into a lot more detail there, but maybe just a high level, why are we about $1 million short between budget and actual there on the services?
So I just want to make sure, are we looking at the right slide, or are you? This one here?
This slide here, I'm looking at the water services actual 7.2 versus 8.1 budget in the revenues of what's coming in. So we're running almost, well, $933,000 short of the budget.
Part of that is due, as Artis mentioned, when we changed our accounting system from GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles, it allows accruals. It also allows us to book revenue in a different part of the year. When you go to a cash basis accounting system, we book the revenue the day it comes in. So it's, and we can't add any revenue to 2024 on January 1st, 2025.
Okay, so really what that is an accounting difference, not people not paying their bills, or, and this is just the revenue as opposed to the expenditure side, right?
Yeah,
so
mostly.
We're just looking, so it's not a matter of people not paying their bills, it's not a matter of we overestimated the amount that was supposed to come in. Is really an accounting issue, which is almost the same thing as loan proceeds in a way.
Some of it is people unable to keep up with their bills, and we have programs to help with that. But the majority of it, I think, is that that change in accounting systems.
Okay. And again, I know we'll get a lot deeper into that during the upcoming plan and discussion there, so, but thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
So I just wanted a follow-on question. When somebody is late with the bill, are we working with them? Because what happens when the city used to a long time ago, they would cut off their water, and then the bill would keep on accruing, and then the city would have to go back and restart the water, which cost more. But we found in the long run, we need to work with our residents to ensure that we help them with their bills, because it would cost, the cost sometimes is more for the city than, you know, somebody who is trying to work on their bills. So I was wondering how we work with that.
Yeah, we absolutely do. We have payment programs set up to allow people to pay off past due balances. We have a variety of programs to help with that, because you're right, there is a fee, you know, there's a cost to go out and turn the meter off, there's a cost to go out and turn the meter back on. Plus, we want to make sure people have access to fresh water. We only go to cutoffs, and we've only not too far in the distant past started redoing that, because during COVID, we weren't, one, we weren't permitted to by the state government, but two, that, you know, during a global pandemic wasn't necessarily the time to add on to people's troubles. So, but we've recently restarted that program, but it is definitely our goal to work with people and help them rather than just go right to the punitive measures, similar to the way we handle other programs in the city.
Okay, all
Is
right.
there any way we can turn off the air conditioning? I feel like I'm going to turn into a igloo.
Apparently, we're cold up here. Is there any way to,
It's like, I'm sorry, it's blowing on our heads and I don't have another coat.
go ahead, Councilmember Murray?
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you for the presentation so far. Since we're asking questions applicable to slides we've already looked at, if we could go back a couple more to the general fund revenues. I actually was curious if you could just speak a little to the variance under for sales tax and development service fees. Like, is that because we thought projects were going to hit last year that maybe are still in the pipeline and we plan to see this year? Or I guess I'm just curious if we have at least thoughts on yeah, where we missed the mark on those.
Yeah, so the development services fees are definitely that we expected projects to get started that didn't necessarily get started. But again, on the revenue side, we do try to be extremely conservative on our estimates, because that you can get into trouble real quick if you're, you know, if you're not more conservative with that. On the sales tax side, I don't actually have a great explanation for that. It's a significant dip, but we don't necessarily know why. But we are keeping an eye on that weekly, if not daily, on occasion.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Walk?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just on that note, and you say we're keeping a close eye on how it's panning out. So this is just a reminder, this is a review of 2024, right? So this is what happened in 2024. We have a 2-year budget, so we're in the second year of the 2-year budget in 2025. And I know we're not at the halfway, we're physically at the halfway point, but as far as reviewing, you know, we haven't gotten to that point, and I guess but the question is, are we seeing that same trend now, continue through since 24, halfway through 25, looking at what you know and following, are we in the same position and we're going to find ourselves potentially another 300-some thousand short again in 25?
So going back real quick, another thing popped into my head that I should have said earlier. Part of the sales tax drop is also related to the development that we expected to happen that didn't, because all of the end-use materials that are delivered here are taxed here. So that's part of it as well. So far, we are down a little bit from where we expect it to be, but not, I don't think that will create a gap, the same gap that you see in 2024 that we'll see in 2025. But we are monitoring that just because of all the national economic trends, and nobody really knows what's going to happen. So,
Thank you.
Councilmember Sonmore?
I had all these concerns in February, so I'm going to go ask, and what is the resulting operating deficit then for 2024? I think you're doing in increments, and I'm just asking for the total number.
We'll get there. I believe that's part of the presentation. I don't know the number off the top of my head.
And we can always get back to you with the exact number, because I know I have my...
I can tell you what it is. I mean, if you wanted to know, I did the math, but I'm just looking for a lot of transparency here, because when I sent the note in February, I estimated we'd be $1.6 million in debt in 2025 and 2026. And the transparency from our budget here says we're not going to be in debt until 2030. So I'm looking for transparency on how we're spending and what is our expenditures versus our operating budget.
Yeah.
And so we're going into the minute overall operating expenditures and revenues, but I wanted to see a summary, which I didn't see.
So we are, it's not debt, it is spending reserves.
Right, and we can't keep on spending those reserves.
Right,
Those are something that we can't. And we had this big conversation, in fact, argument about it in February. I remember it very well. But the problem is both the operating revenues and our actual budgets are below operating expenditures. And so if we say it's in the budget, to me, that's a bad excuse. I mean, even though we say it's in the budget, if we're already in debt, don't we need to adjust that budget and really look? And that's why I'm looking, I asked you both, for our financial team to really understand what they're signing off on our financial expenditures, because we are spending more than we're taking in. And if anybody gives me the excuse for the 1% property tax, I understand that that's an issue, but we can't use it as a crutch because there's other cities that are balancing their budgets, even though they're only collecting the 1% property tax. And so tonight I was really looking for transparency, because our city put out communication that our city was not in trouble with any finances whatsoever, even though in February we pointed out that we were in financial issues. And I've heard that we are trying to cut some budgets, but that hasn't been very transparent to us. And we're spending $100,000 on people coming in to sit in a meeting to look at our finances when we know we're already in trouble. And I feel that we're telling this team we have to raise revenues instead of cutting it. And that's where we're at with the first meeting. But I'm really looking for transparency. I want to know how much we're in debt and how much we're looking at cutting budget, because we can't keep on spending the way we are.
Mayor Pretend, did you have something?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I think we have been, some of us have been very clear that we are headed the wrong direction. We know that. But to clarify technical terms, which I think when we use the term debt, and I think what the city manager was saying is we're not in debt. It's because debt is a different term. So I guess we want to be clear that what we're doing, what Councilmember Sonbar is pointing out, though, that we do need to be concerned about is we're spending, we have enough in, because of reserves, we're not running a negative number yet.
We are. I believe we are.
Well, but what we are doing is spending more in expenditures than we're bringing in revenues each year. Yes, and so absolutely, that is, so for clarity purposes, that is absolutely correct, and that is the concern, and that's why we need to be cautious with our budget, and we're kind of getting there. I know I got off track with some of the conversation, but so I should let you get on. But I did want to clarify.
You brought it up, so I wanted to
no, that's what I say.
right there.
I probably got us off track, so sorry about that. But I did want to clarify that we're not actually running in debt, but we're headed the wrong direction. If we don't make corrections within the next budget cycle, we are going to be running red, and we had to do it.
And that's what I pointed out, and I got in trouble in February because I've got the email here. The paper had it. So we're spending more on ongoing salaries, benefits, services, street, debt services, and recreation more than we're collecting in revenue. And it's nice to say we have that reserve, but at our last meeting, they told us we need to have more in our reserves. That was the big message that I took away. And I'm like, well, that's really nice, but show me where we're stopped spending. Show me where it's like my salary isn't going up this year, but I can say everything else is going up there. So I have to adjust what I bring in to meet what I want to buy. And it's just, to me, it's just very simple. You're not supposed to, you should not, responsibility, not spend more than you're taking in. And that's my bottom line. And you,
And I
you
agree.
can, massage it and say what you want. And I respect that.
Yeah, and I appreciate the point, and I would agree that when we get to that point, which again is not right now, but since I brought it up in the first place, apologize, but we are going to
you
need to
hit
be.
my button.
Yeah, I know, but I appreciate the fact that we do need to recognize that it's not just about increasing revenues, it's about also watching our expenditures and trying to reallocate what we're spending to be able to bring us back in line. So I absolutely agree with that point, but thank you.
And that's why I wanted to know what the number was, because if our city doesn't know, then it has me very concerned, because it's $400,172. And so those are the numbers I'm looking for. And we're still not following our financial policies. And I see expenditures keep on going out, and they're huge. And I'm wondering where we're saving at. So I know it's nice to see this budget, but there are concerns.
Anyone else before we continue? Okay.
All right, I'm going to get us over into the capital funds, which was the next after looking at the water utilities. So the capital funds, we're going to be going into a little bit more in depth into the capital investment fund and the street construction fund to look at the variances that we had there. The large amount of these variances in revenues come from the fact that the funding for these projects a lot of times have to do with reimbursement grants. And if we don't have the expenditures during the year, we don't have reimbursements to put through to the states and other parts to go through for reimbursements. So that's the major driver of these, other than, as you can see, the transfers from our other funds into these. Once again, you can see that in graphical form. And then the street construction fund, for the most part, is the variances there are the same thing. The state and local grants was the major portion of the variance. And that'll be something that we'll see when we get into the second half with the expenditures. You'll see that there's going to be a similar variance on the expenditures, where we didn't have the expenditures that we had planned, thus we don't have the revenues we have planned for these reimbursement type projects. And then I believe we're going to move into our expenditure section. Now, the general fund, as listed here, this is the way that the funds are broken out in our budget documents. As they report to the state, there are other funds that are rolled up into the general fund for presentation purposes of the state. So when those funds are all rolled together, the expenditures do not exceed the revenues. But this is our breakdown of the major components of the expenditures at the general fund and whether we were exceeded or were under our targets for those items. And the general fund also had probably the largest impact from the gap to cash conversion on these, because expenditures had the same differences, where the look back period and the amount of expenses that can go from one year to another is different under cash than accrual. So we had to pull some expenses into 2024 that would have under GAAP been in a 2025 or 2023, depending on how the bills came in. So pretty much if it's paid in 2024, now the budget, or now the actuals will have that number be displayed as an expenditure for 2024. We now have all, well, most of the rest of the governmental funds. For these funds, the majority of them came in under the budget for the expenditures. The Fleet Management Fund, the major variance that we wanted to discuss here, why was our supplies under what we had budgeted? It was mostly due to less in fuel and repair costs, and those are things that we tend to be conservative in our budgeting. We budget for them to be a little bit higher, and if they come in lower, they are lower. And then we also had, and I mentioned this back in some of our transfers, larger pieces of equipment, including dump truck and a loader that were purchased that make up those capital outlays. We then are looking at the Recreation Fund and overall expenditures, both under the general view of salary, supplies, and services, but also we were able to break things down for the various programs. You can see which programs came in under and which ones exceeded their budget slightly, but overall the fund was under its budgeted expenditures. And the graphical form of how the fund performed for expenditures looks like this. And then per program, you can see how the different programs did in terms of what they were budgeted versus what they actually spent during the year. Moving on to the street operating funds expenditures. And overall, most categories ended up being under the budget amounts. These are the remainder of our governmental funds. And we don't have a slide to break out any of these in more detail, but we did want to mention that the solid waste program is the discount program for qualified customers based on income. Just a little more detail on what that item is. And then housing need funds mostly is paying dues to the Snohomish County Housing Authority. Now I get to take a look at our utility funds and how they performed. We have a slide breaking out each of these in more detail. The majority of the water utilities variance is coming due to capital outlays being less than anticipated based on when the projects were actually put into effect. And then also our supplies, which includes mostly maintenance supplies, were conservatively budgeted based on making sure that we had in the budget what we needed for the year. And we ended up having it be slightly under budget. Then move on to sewer utilities, and much the same effect. It is the variance for the sewer utilities comes down to the capital outlays. All comes down to the when and how the different programs were put into play based on when they were budgeted versus when the expenditures actually started coming through. And storm and water, once again, capital outlays played a large portion of this. And then services, less than budgeted. Costs, the major driver, we looked into that a little bit too, was less costs than were budgeted for the comprehensive update plan. That was the one that came, the project that came in under budget in the services section there. Now, here's our capital funds. We're going to go more into detail on the capital improvement fund and the street construction fund. If we remember back to the revenue sections, a lot of our revenues in these funds are based off of reimbursements. So we were under budget on our revenues, and we're seeing that we are under budget on the variance is under budget on the expenditures, and that's primarily what has happened. Our capital outlays are the largest drivers. It mostly comes down to, these are grant-funded projects. If we don't have the expenditures during the year based on where the projects were in their life cycle, we don't have the revenue to draw down from the states and other governments, and we also don't have the corresponding outlays on these projects.
Oh, sorry. We have a question here.
You have a question, please. What slide should you need to go to, sir?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I appreciate the explanation on the capital outlays and the fact that the reason that we're so under budget is because projects weren't done. It might be helpful for us to have an idea of what those projects are, so that we're familiar with, and where we are in those projects, and recognizing that basically that just because it didn't get done during this budget cycle doesn't mean that it's just done, right? It continues on into the next budget cycle, and the actual expenditures are likely to occur in, the following year or following years. But it might be worthwhile during this presentation just to have an idea of what those projects are, so we're and an explanation of the variance and why, timeline, what we're expecting on some of those projects. Thank you.
All right. Okay.
All right. And that takes us through the expenditures and looking at those. And we want to end up with our ending debt balances as of the end of 2024. We have our outstanding bonds with the maturity dates listed, their initial balances, and what they ended at with balances for 2024. We also had two trust fund loans that we had out. This was what I was talking about, where we had less drawdowns than anticipated for some of these. But those were our ending balances and what their maturity dates will be for the outstanding balance.
And for that one in particular, that was the West Side Water Main project.
You have any questions? And if you'd let me know what slide I need to go back to answer.
All right. Were all the questions already asked, or does anyone have any more? Councilmember Murray.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say thank you. You already answered the question that I had, but I appreciate, I know there's been a lot of work to get us to a point where we are taking a look at good numbers from 2024. So I just appreciate, one, having you here for the first time. Thank you for being here. And just appreciate all the work of our finance team to get us to a place where we are a little bit closer to having real-time information and ensuring that we have faith in those numbers. So this is incredibly helpful, and I look forward to continuing to get closer and closer to real-time updates. So thank you.
All right. Anyone else? Councilmember Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor. I understand this is for 2024, but something that prompted me, and this be for the city manager and the council, is on the revenues and tax for our gambling revenue. Many of us have noticed that the on Highway 99, the I forget, they changed their name, but it's owned by Maverick, has closed. And I do believe it has to do with Senate Bill 5512 on centralized surveillance. And I think it's important that we all learn this, as it's two senators that worked on this bill, and they're both in the Yakima area. And So they're not around here. So we might need someone to explain to us what's going on in the state, because this is cutting down our revenue as our city is trying to increase revenue. Now it's going down, and nobody knows really why. But I think that'd be good if we could have a discussion later, not now, but and see what's going on. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. That is definitely something that we're paying attention to, and I have reached out to other city partners who have facilities to see what their position is on it. But I've looked into that issue quite a bit over the last couple of months, talk to people and see if we can have a unified position among other cities.
I noticed that our gambling revenue was over $1 million, and so I wonder if it's going to continue that way, or it's going to be a third of that, or what?
Yeah, so for 2024, we had that revenue source. With the closing of the one on Highway 99, that's going to take a significant chunk out of that. But we're aware of it, so we're able to plan for it. But we also want to make sure that that source of revenue for cities and other cities around us is sustainable and predictable. So.
Right, thank you. Anyone else? Councilmember Woodard?
Thank you, Mayor. I also just want, excuse me, just wanted to express my thanks. But if you wouldn't mind just jumping to slide 80, at least on my slide deck, it's slide 80. And I really just want to get a better grip on the capital outlays. So it's the one where it starts off with actual was 1,600, and then budgeted it was 10.8, and it ended at a variance of 9.2. So capital improvement expenditures is what it says. That's okay. Yeah, so when you see one that says 1,600, like I say, it's near the tail end of the presentation.
There it is.
Yep, that's the one. So, and really probably any of them could have worked. This one seemed to have a really large variance. So as I'm understanding, what we budgeted for at the 10.8 were projects that we thought would get off the ground. That's fair to say? And this is 2024. So I presume in 2025, that number, and this is the question, I guess, that number looks different, but is that because there are different projects, or is the 2024 just a carryover into 2025, and that we're just kind of hoping all those? Okay.
That's accurate. So part of it was the change from gap to cash, but part of it is when we have these grants, we have the security, we have the paper, but we have to spend the money and then ask for the reimbursement later. But those projects weren't started or weren't completed, depending on where they were in the life cycle of the project. Many of those were started or several of those were started at the beginning of 2025. They may not end this year. They may go into next year. So that number will continue to fluctuate, but the reason for it is that the reimbursement part.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anyone else? Mayor Pro Tem Wall?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, welcome and thank you. Appreciate the presentation. And as Councilmember Murray points out, we recognize the heavy lift to just get us caught up. And so it's hopefully in the future we'll be able, in 2025, when we get the 2025 financial report, we'll be able to have that sooner in the year, so that when halfway through the year, we'll have the halfway point discussion around the halfway point. But know that we recognize that and are thankful for the work that went into getting this prepared and getting us caught up, because there was a lot of stuff that had to be dealt with. So thank you and great work. So, and the other thing that we should point out is that this is a different style of presenting the information that has been done in the past. And I like a lot of it. I like the way it's been done. I think a couple of suggestions that we'll talk more about in the Finance Committee when we, next time we get together and talk about how we want to present this. But I think a couple of just high-level things. I think we should start and end with the big picture. In other words, where we actually are total budget-wise, and and end with ending fund balance, so that we know where we are. The actual numbers, kind of getting at Councilmember Sonmore's point, is this is a great overview by fund, but we don't get the ending fund balance and picture. And so I think starting with that and ending with that is really the important thing, especially on the general fund budget. And the other thing, another thing I think is, rather than separate by all revenues based on fund and then going into all expenditures based on fund, I think we should be talking about each fund, and talk about the revenues, and then talk about the expenditures, and then have the total, at the end again. It can go by each fund where, here's the picture based on revenues, here's broken out like you've done, which I think is great the way it's done as far as breaking out what each of those variances are. So we're talking, when we're having the discussion, we're talking about the entire picture for each fund. So in the general fund, we're talking about all of the revenues and the variances, and we're talking about all of the expenditures and the variances. And then I think it would be worth having a discussion about, or a slide about, the variances, kind of the bullet points on, the higher level. I mean, not every variance, but some of the bigger variances, what those variances are and why we're seeing that, and what, in other words, what's the explanation is and what we're doing about it, kind of, if that makes sense. Again, we can get into more detail at the Finance Committee meeting, but I think that's kind of what would be helpful for us as we're receiving this information, to be able to process it better, and for the public to understand it, get a little more clear picture. But do appreciate the work that went into getting us here, and the new presentation style. I think we just need to tweak a little bit. Oh, and then the other fund that is not here is the reserve funds, for instance, and where we are. And I think there are a couple of other funds that I'm curious about. Whether or not we need to necessarily include them in this, I guess we can have a further discussion about. But in fact, one of the things we need to have a discussion about, separate maybe from the overview, the financial report, is like the housing fund. We have a housing fund that we haven't done anything with, and so I think that's worth having a discussion about how, for instance, can be used to help with affordable housing projects, and for the rental programs and different things. So I think there's the housing fund we need to have a separate discussion about, just like I'd like to have a separate discussion about the art fund, the public art fund, and how we're utilizing that to be able to create more of a sense of place, and how we're using those expenditures to really get big public art projects like we have coming in the plaza down there. Anyway, those are just some side notes. We can get into more detail later, but appreciate everything you're doing. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to say that I like the graphs, and not the Express spreadsheet that we used to get.
I like the spreadsheet too, though.
He likes the spreadsheets, but on an individual basis. But on a presentation, it was just really hard to read all those lines. They're way too small for this. Anyways, so this is much easier to understand and to see the actual numbers and everything. Anyone else before we go on? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You made it through your first one. Yes, his first presentation.
You did well.
All right, so So the next is the city manager's report. Are you going to do it from your seat over there? Okay.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members. Just a couple of things to mention tonight. First, we had the open house last night focused on the transportation plan. It had 17, 18 people in attendance, which for a topic like that, I thought was pretty good. But a lot of good information, and I'm glad people were able to come out and take a look at the projects that we're planning and give us some input on that. The next, for your next meeting on the 28th, our brand-new agenda system will be in place. It's going to be much more user-friendly than the one we've been using the past couple of weeks, and it will have links to chapters, so links to subject items. So you can click, get right to it. Should be very easy to navigate, and it's certainly going to make our internal process much easier to handle. So, and it was cheaper than the one we were using before, so wins all around. Thanks to our clerk, Jennifer, who did a lot of the research and found the best one for us. Also, last one that I wanted to mention, which it's a big impact on our operations, but as you'll see next week when we discuss the public safety costs, not so much on the cost end of things, but the Linwood Jail Facility is opened with video capabilities, which saves a significant amount of time for our officers going back and forth. The drive to Linwood is 5 minutes versus the drive to Everett, which who knows depending on the time of day. So we're happy to see that, and we think that's going to help us out quite a lot on the efficiency end. That's all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right. Does anyone have any questions or comments for the city manager? Okay. Thank you. And now we'll move on to the council liaison reports, which should be shorter this evening. We only have to go back 2 weeks. Let's start over there with Councilmember Murray.
Is that a challenge? I mean, you know, I could probably take these 2 weeks and talk for 2 hours. No, I will keep it relatively brief. So on the 8th, I had the privilege of going to one of our movie nights down at Terrace Creek Park, affectionately known as Candy Cane Park. Got to see the Goofy movie for the first time in my life with my children, which was a lot of fun. I'm just grateful, I think, thanks to staff and to the community for supporting those events. I think it's been a lot of fun to continue to bring out more folks and different folks, and it's always nice to see familiar faces at those events, as well as continue to see lots of new folks show up as well. And so just big thank you to Andrew for all of his work, as well as the rest of the staff that participates in those. On the 9th, joined Ivy League for their monthly cleanup, and they continue to do amazing work. I hadn't had a chance to go in a really long time, and they are just, if you are looking for a way to get involved in the community where people are warm and welcoming, I showed up and they gave me donuts, and then I had great conversation while I was clipping ivy, and they are doing good work up at Evergreen Field right now. We did a bunch of ivy removal and invasive removal next to the tennis courts, which was a good use of a sunny Saturday morning. Other than that, we had our work session. I had my monthly meeting with the city manager today, and I think that completes. Oh, I will say happy National Senior Citizens Day. Had a chance to have a great conversation with the executive director for the Ballinger Center, which is our senior center down at Lake Ballinger, at National Night Out, and today is National Senior Day, and they are doing so many cool things down there. So I think particularly for our seniors, although they welcome folks of all ages, but they have some great programming, and I think if you haven't checked it out, that is a really great resource, and just appreciate all of the seniors in our community who make this a really great place and who have put in a lot of time and love over the years. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Woodard.
Thank you, Mayor. I have 37th, no, I'm kidding. So on the 9th, I too had the opportunity to join Ivy League, and again, I will just say I don't get to go very often either, and I don't go the full time, so please, whether you can give an hour or the full amount, come on out. It's exactly as Councilmember Murray described it, a welcoming environment, and congratulations to the state of Washington for making that invasive ivy illegal to sell or move or whatever, all of that good stuff. So yay, get rid of this ivy. On the 12th, I had a chance to go to our library and join the African Dance and Music, and that was absolutely had to join. It was amazing. The next day, I had the opportunity to join, and Senator Cantwell's office had some of her legislative aides out, and we had a chance to join our staff at the library and talk about the needs there with the roof in particular. On the 13th, I made it to the LTAC open house. On the 14th was at the study session. On the 16th, I participated in 14, felt like it, in 4 different events up and down the corridor from Arlington down the shoreline, but I only mentioned the Linwood Luau where I had the opportunity to speak, which was just, again, thank you to them, but also thank you to those communities who welcomed us in and did a lot of community building that day. 20th, which I think was yesterday, I made the tail end of the traffic open house, and so there were quite a few people still sticking around, which was exciting to hear what their thoughts were. And then just today, had my city manager meeting as well, but I also had the opportunity to join the governor and U.S. House of Representative member Rick Larson as they listen to the impacts on hunger prevention with the cuts and the decisions being made out of BC. And that is the end of my report.
Thank you. Councilmember Ryan?
Thank you, Mayor. July 8th, I attended our Left One Police Retirement Board. And on the 15th, I did not attend, but read the minutes for our Arts Commission meeting. The submission for the art show is closed. They have a lot more submissions this year, which is going to keep the jury, several juries for each category to jury in the work. And the art show will be in 2 months. You're all invited. I'll be naming it more, but it's Friday the 19th will be a private award ceremony. It'll be in this room, and then we'll dismiss and go to the library rooms to look at all the artwork. And then the arts will open for the public on the 20th and go for 1 week. That's the end of my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Sonmore?
Thank you. I also attended Left One on August 12th and the Park and Rec meeting on August 12th as well. And unfortunately, we had one member, as most of you know, resigned, and that was Molly Luna, who had been a longtime supporter, so we were really sad to see her go. We had an extensive overview that you'll be seeing soon on the plaza and how the redesign's going on that. We talked about the pool and rec fees that are coming our way already. We looked at all the special events that have been done by Park and Rec. I call it Park and Rec, sorry. Earth Day, July 3rd, National Night Out, Summer Nights, tree lighting will be December 5th. And we had talked about in-kind services that we used to have an agreement with MTYAA that is no longer. We talked about the day of service, that there'll be a free swim, and that's September 13. We also talked about the bubble event and other projects were Evergreen, Ballinger, West Side, the Transit Connection, Firefighter Memorial Park, Tree City USA, expansion on the volunteer program, all the hours that the Ivy League has contributed. And yeah, I was really surprised, but Councilman Woodard already discussed it, that they banned selling ivy. I thought that was interesting. I would like to see bamboo added to that list. And then expanded events for outreach. And then we also talked about disc golf. Our meetings, people that attend are absolutely wonderful. Usually the meeting should be an hour, and sometimes we go 2.5 hours. So there's a lot of talking and a lot of discussion. But my favorite thing to discuss in that meeting is a fruit forest that will be in Ballinger Park. And so I just really appreciate everybody that's on that board. I did have a chance to see a lot of kids at the bubble event. I also attended July 3rd. I had missed one meeting, so I'm going back just a little bit. And since Councilman Ryan brought up the arts, I was just wondering, when will the winners be announced on that? Rick, do you know?
On the 19th.
I know that the entries were last Friday, because I had to work on that, but I was just wondering.
The winners
After-
or who's entered?
Yeah, when will the jury
Everybody that
already-
entered will get an email on if they're in or not.
Like in a month or so?
Well,
It depends when they're gonna
yeah, it
jury
depends
'em,
on
right?
the juror. So it could be a week. So they'll announce then if they got in or not. So they'll get to know. And then the awards, of course, usually they'll let people know a week in advance for the awards. That'll be September, probably 15th, if you got an award or not. So I wish I had more info, but
No,
I don't.
no, that's
'cause the-
perfect,
yeah.
because somebody was asking me, and I said, well, it depends on what you entered in and what juror has time and when they're going to oversee. And so if you're like in sculpture, it's a different juror, and that person might be on this date and this person. So I was just wondering.
Yes,
but that
that's
was perfect
exactly
then.
it.
Perfect. And speaking
you.
of the arts, I'll just say it, and this is a little off topic, but it is on topic because Bev Gunn was one of our volunteers when I was on the Arts Commission, and we did a project management plan on the arts, and we had lots of fun doing it, and she sadly passed away. And I just noticed recently, and our mayor would probably know, her house was recently, it looked like it sold, and very saddened by that. She was absolutely a wonderful volunteer for the city and just a great woman altogether. And a side note, I found out she had attended my parents' wedding. That's how small a world it was. So I'm very sad to see that. And then I heard there is a movie tomorrow night. I think it's Sing, but I was really saddened to hear that I missed Princess Bride when I was on vacation. Everybody I know has seen that except me. And so I need to see that. Yes. Is that good? It is that good. Oh, really? I have not seen it. So, and then also attended Tour de Terrace, and then attended the finance meeting on July 21st. That was our first meeting. And I'm wondering if the council, I know I didn't get one, but if the council, whoever wants one, can get a finance book so they can see what's going on. And if you want to go to those meetings, or if you want a summary, just let us know so we can keep you current on that information. And that's all I have to report.
Thank you. Councilmember Page.
Thank you. Also on the 9th, I am with the Ivy League, and we were really working on a kind of a steep hill. And I remember looking around and seeing other council members, and I'll be honest, I was kind of hoping a fourth would show up so that I could sneak away because those hills were killing me. But yeah, that's always a good time, with that group. And that was then on the 12th. I also attended over at Snow Owls, the African dance music. And if you weren't there, you really missed something. They had everybody dancing. They had everybody singing. They had, and the whole thing was stolen by 4 or 5 little children that probably weren't older than 4 years old, who from the very beginning that the music started playing, they just took over the floor. And it was really nice to see the diversity that was in the room and how everybody was really integrated into what was happening, with the music. So that was really good. On the 16th, kind of like Councilmember Woodard, represented in Everett at the Sounds of Africa with the Washington West African Center, and then Celebrate Shoreline, got an opportunity to spend some time with the city manager there and just kind of talk about some of the things that we're talking about comparably between the cities. And then on the 19th, I had opportunity to attend the African Americans Leaders Professional Network, and actually spent some time with Senator John Lovick, just kind of talk about various things that matter. And he really gave us a nice perspective on his work with, the police and the academies, and how important that is, and how the culture is so important, and as far as where it's moving and the direction that it's going in. And that was really impactful, the way he presented it, and how passionate he was about how important those schools are today, and the message that's being sent to officers as they go out into the street. And And then on the 20th, which was yesterday, pretty busy day, in the morning, I was at a breakfast with the Edmonds Civic Roundtable Group, and with a few city council members from Linwood as well as Edmonds, and it was a really good question and answer going on with Chris Collier, who's the director of the government, relations at Haskell, and again, it was very educational, but at the same time, very relevant for the very things that we see here almost every week, when Christy and her group comes forward and talks to us about middle housing and affordable housing and things like that. And then also on Wednesday, and this is important, I think, was able to sit at the board meeting with the Access Project. And, because the Access Project is doing things that are affecting Mountlake, Terrace, and Edmonds, the school district, he really was able to, have some discussion about some of the activities that are going on that are affecting, our population here in the city, as well as some of the challenges that they're facing, that affect our population here in the city. And then I got in on the tail end of the traffic presentation last night, the impact fee program. And then this morning, I had an opportunity to meet with Lauren Steiger. She is the domestic violence she's the director of the domestic violence contributions and volunteer program in Everett. And the reason why we were getting together, because I'm in the process of connecting the owner of Getaway. The Getaway Tavern wants to help them with their wish list that they have on their website. So I brought the two of them together to speak about, the various programs that they do over there for the city and for the community that can help, with, just helping them get through some of their wish list items. And that was, on them coming to me saying, hey, the Getaway, what can we do? After the tour that we went on, I just been looking for ways to, how do we help? I know we've helped financially, but how do we also help with other things and get the other community members involved? So they are very excited about, no, that's the understatement. They're very excited about getting the community involved and helping them with the wish list, and they plan on doing that. And then lastly, this afternoon, I had lunch with Julie Kang. She is the King County, City, Washington Government Immigration and Refugee Commissioner. And we really talked about our welcoming week that's coming up and, maybe how they can, play a role in being a part of, that day, from her seat as the commissioner there. So that's all I got.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I don't know about the wish list. Can you tell me a little bit more about the Getaways wish list?
No, well, it isn't the wish list isn't the Getaways, it's the domestic violence services. So, and I can have Jeff, I'm sending everybody the link, but when you go to their website, they have a menu, and on the menu, they have 2 wish lists. And it's the things that they need at the domestic violence services, for their housing and for the children and for the adults and just some of the supplies that they need. And Kat over at the Getaway, talked about, well, we're always doing things where we're with a community, some drive where the community brings things, for whatever cause that they're working on at the time. And it just so happens we were talking about they did a drive for the police department here for stuffed animals for the police officers, but then they couldn't give it to the police department. So that's how we got on the subject about, the domestic violence center, and because they have about 150 stuffed animals. So she was like, well, you know what? It's not just going to be about the stuffed animals. I want their wish list. And what can we do to help them get them the things? She said, I know MLT will respond. And so that's what that is. So I'll make sure you all get that.
Are you going to be following up? That's something near and dear to my heart. So that's
Absolutely.
why I was wondering, maybe you could keep us informed on what's on the wish list.
Yeah, sure.
There's a commercial out that shows, doesn't show what it implies a woman's going through domestic violence and she wants to keep her dog. And it's something you don't think about. So I'm hoping that they're doing something where these domestic violence men or women or children are able to keep their pets, because you don't think about that. And that animal is a lot of support animals, and a lot of housing do not accept animals. And I know they were having a little bit of an issue with pathways for women lately. That's something a former council person in Edmonds started many, many years ago, and they've always been connected to domestic violence. So I didn't know if that was connected to that or not. But yeah, I'd like to hear more on that.
Yeah, and if I recall correctly, and Councilman Murray can help, I believe that they told us, you know, if you ever go on the tour, you're going to be moved. You know, they do a very good job. Deborah, the CEO, and the operation manager, you know, they do a very good job of explaining what they do and why they do it and how they do it. But I believe they said they're the only center in the county, right? So, and they lost over, I think, $1 million in money, you know, just because of things happening, you know, this year. So there's a big need, but, you know, they really spell it out very well. And yeah, I'll make sure everyone on the council gets the website.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Wall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Oftentimes, this role feels like a full-time job. But this last week, actually, it was, my focus was shifted to, and this is part of my, I guess, Liaison report, but dealing with family health care issues and learning and relearning about the healthcare system. So most of my week last week was dealing with healthcare. But I did have a couple of things. One is the Snohomish County Tomorrow Exploratory Committee meeting that we had our, the last topic was really delving into transportation and infrastructure. And as we know, ICC, Snohomish County has intergovernment coordinating committee, ICC, dealing with transportation, does a great job with transportation, but what's not covered is all the other infrastructure. As far as a coordinating committee, there's no coordination on utilities, and which we're learning more about some of the challenges of utilities dealing with Alderwood wastewater and treatment and Edmonds facility, and dealing with Everett's providing water. And there's really no place in our county for talking together, working together, collaborating, trying to figure out how we're dealing with other infrastructure, both provision of the capital infrastructure as well as the maintaining and providing the services through the infrastructure like water, sewer, utilities, et cetera. And so we spent a lot of time talking about that and how we, as a county and through Snohomish County Tomorrow, can really help us better collaborate on other infrastructure funding and provision of services. So that's what we spent a lot of time on the 12th looking at. Was it the 12th, Steve, that we did the Senator Cantwell? So also participated in the Cantwell walkthrough with the library. That was great to see folks there. And Senator Cantwell's interest in helping to fund some of those capital projects that are necessary for the HVAC and roof and whatnot. So certainly appreciate both. And by the way, just a reminder that both Senator Cantwell has that as a budget request in the federal budget, and Representative Del Bene has it in the House side. And so we're hoping that through the federal process, of course, we all know how things are playing out at the federal level. Who knows what's going to end up in the final budget? But there is hope based on, and because of the support of Senator Cantwell and Representative Del Bene, that we might be able to get some funding, additional funding, to help us address the library needs there. Let's see, we had the council work session on the 14th, and earlier today had the co-chairs of myself and Stephanie Vignell, co-chairs of the exploratory committee, talked with Ann Larson, who's the manager of Snohomish County Tomorrow, about the next steps as far as the exploratory committee. And so we've really FYI, we've got 4 topics again, remember, housing, economic development, transportation infrastructure, and health and human services. And at this point, because we only have a couple meetings left in this year, and we still need to get into some structural issues about how we want to address the 3 key topics of housing, economic development, and transportation infrastructure. We're going to we're postponing further consideration on health and human services. Not that it's not important, and we recognize that it is critical that that is a key piece of how all the moving parts work. But we're not going to be able to get to that this year. We're going to get to that next year. And in the meantime, we're going to focus in on the structure of the housing, economic development, and transportation infrastructure that we want to recommend to the steering committee at the October meeting. And then we'll have a full discussion about that at the General Assembly, which I believe is December, I'll let you know as we get closer, but December 11th. I think is the General Assembly that we're all invited to for a full presentation of what our recommendation is. And then the steering committee will then, based on the feedback that we get from the General Assembly, all of you, be adopting those recommendations in the early, in 2026. And then the exploratory committee will get a little further into the health and human services and how that plays a role and how we can be better collaborating on that front as well. So with that, I will conclude my report and let's get home tonight.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, mine is very short. On August 12th, I came to City Hall because they were doing a selfie for the whole, for everybody who works here. And the photographer was our drone. And I don't know if that's really a selfie, but it was a really great photo. And then I also attended the LTAC, the lodging tax public meeting. And then on the 16th, I attended the Linwood Luau, and we did. When we go to Linwood Luau, you do get to speak. You do get to introduce yourself. And so I keep going to that thinking, I want one in my city. I want something like that. So, and that's the end of my report. So next is new business. Does anyone have any new business? Okay. Well, really quickly, I just wanted to say that I wanted to thank the Edmonds School District for cutting all the vegetation down at Mountlake Terrace Elementary School, because I can't imagine why we have a sign there when the vegetation is taller than the sign. So now you can see the sign. And Randy Gravel, as you all know, wrote a book about the history of Mountlake Terrace, and he apparently is going to be speaking for the second time at the plaza, Mountlake Terrace Plaza. So if you want to know when and where or whatever, you can always come and let me and ask me, because I understand it's for the residents. But I just wanted to say that we do have somebody who wrote a history about Mountlake Terrace, and I would like to have him come to our city council too. So that's something in the future. But and that's it. Anyone else? I think we all want to go home. We're adjourned. Thank you very much.